I'll very rarely start a tutorial by saying what I'm about to show you doesn't make sense, and it does for the most part, but it's the select subject, select background masking tools inside of Lightroom and Photoshop Camera Raw. And on the surface, it seems like they're exactly the same, just the reverse of each other. And in many cases they are, okay? But I'm gonna show you here that when you start to use them together, which you never would because you think they're just the same but reverse of each other, but when you start to use them together with each other, that they're actually not the same, and hopefully it gives you a few ideas on how you can improve your masking. Let's go ahead and dive in. So what I've done is I'm inside of Lightroom Classic, which would be the same for the cloud mobile version of Lightroom, which also would be the same for Camera Raw. You just go to Filter, Camera Raw, or open up a raw photo and it would take you into your Camera Raw window where you'd have all of the same masking options. So what we'll do from here is I've got two different photos, and what I did is I did select subject, okay? And then I changed my mask overlay to white on black. I took a screen capture and then I got rid of that mask and I did select background, and then I went up to the top and I clicked on invert and I took a screen capture of that. So I did this for both this photo that we see right here, and I did this for another photo here just to see what they looked like. So let's cancel out of this one, and I overlaid them on top of each other inside of Photoshop. And the only other thing I'm gonna do is just crop it down, crop the screen captures down to where it's just the image area where we're not seeing anything else here, okay? Because this is really all we care about, all we want to look at. So let's take a look here. The first one here is Eagle. So again, I've got two screen captures, select subject and then select background. On the surface, they look exactly the same, but let's test it out, right? Let's go to select subject layer, and what we can do is we can change the blend mode here to difference. And what difference does is difference will show you in black and white whatever's different between these two layers. That's what this blend mode does. So you can see here the panel that was shown up there, you can see some black and white up there because it's showing some differences. On our image, they are identical, all right? Same concept with what we have here. Let's go turn on that one layer, and then let's turn on the layer right above it. To the naked eye, they look exactly the same, but again, we can test it out more officially and change that blend mode to difference. Again, you'll see that the panel looks a little bit different, which shows us that the difference blend mode is working, but we don't see any change there, which means that they're identical. So what this is telling us is that when we do select subject, all right, or if we were to do select background and then invert it, what we get is essentially the same thing. So select subject and select background appear to be the same exact thing, just the inverse of each other. But what's interesting about this is it doesn't totally hold true. And this is why I wanted to do the tutorial. And this is why it's more than just a 60-second tutorial to say they are the same thing. Because if I do select subject here, and I'll zoom in a little bit. If I do select subject, you can see it left a little bit of that sky in the background there. You can see it might have even, not been perfect over here. What's interesting is that, here, let me actually keep it zoomed in. What's interesting is that if I go to subtract, okay, and I subtract the background, keep a close eye on what happens here. It changed. And it might be a little hard to see with that color overlay, so let's change it back to white on black. So again, I'll go to subtract and I'll do subtract, select background, and it changed. So while they look like the same thing, it appears that when you're using them with each other, when you're using them both together, they're actually not the same thing. And to me, that's the whole point of the tutorial, and that's the bigger picture here, is that if you do select subject on something and it's not perfect, doing something with the background could actually help you. Now, I've got a couple of examples here where you can see, I'm going to use some of the tools together to see how you can get better selections. But first, a very quick 30-second word from our sponsor. I'll keep it fast. If you're into using these selection masking tools inside of Lightroom and Adobe Camera Raw, I've got a course called No Light, No Problem, because the tools aren't all just about making perfect selections. Sometimes you can use these tools really creatively to add light to photos where maybe it fell a little bit flat, maybe you weren't there at the right time of day, you can't get back to a location, it's just not meeting what you saw. And there's a lot of creative things that you can do with these tools, so I hope you'll swing by. It's a very affordable course, very easy to watch, very quick to watch. Hope you'll swing by and find out a little bit more. Back to our tutorial where I was about to show you how to use some of those tools together. Now in this case here, and I'd shown this, I'll make sure I link the tutorials in the description because I'd done a couple videos on using some of the different tools. In this case here, I would actually subtract select sky, and that would get rid of that area in the wings here. Someone pointed out when I showed an image like this and they said, what about if you wanted this? What about if you considered the trees to be the subject as well? Well, then what I'd have to do is go in here and add, and I could add an object selection. And again, it's not totally the tutorial, but I think it ties in. I could add an object selection and go ahead and paint in around, and the tutorials I'm linking will show you a little bit more about that. But I could go in and paint around and it would select most of that. And then that's not perfect because it got a lot of the sky, but again, I could go to that object layer up there and I could subtract select sky from it, and that would get rid of a lot of the sky too. So there's a lot of different ways to get to this point. But if we were to look at a photo like this, and I were to do select subject, again, we'll zoom in and I'll show you the bottom here where it got a little bit too much. You can see down there, if I do subtract select background, it actually did change it. Now, I don't know that there's an automatic way for us to get that to be perfect, so I'd probably go down there and do subtract and use a brush, and probably have to brush in a little down there. So that would help, but same thing that we have with this one, okay? So if I were to go in here, let's clear out all our masks, and let's do select subject. Let's say I wanted to make that a little bit brighter, and I'll make it too bright just so it's obvious what the problems are, so it's not perfect inside of these little areas. I could subtract select sky, all right? And I think that would probably be the better way to go than try to do the background. So I think select sky, subtracting that helped out here. But at the same time, there still is a little bit down here. So there I could go to subtract select background, and you can see that helps. Not only does it help remove some of the areas down there, but it actually seems to help the edges. Okay, so let's zoom in here. I'm gonna undo that last step, and I'm gonna go to subtract select background. Watch the edges. See how they changed as well. So people that are looking to get firmer edges or more precise edges around the selection that you're trying to do, this whole selecting something and then subtracting the background could be a good way to do it rather than taking, a brush and painstakingly going through some of those different areas to try to remove it. So what's that tell you? Well, on the surface, these tools look very technical, but they're actually very creative. There is no right workflow for any of it. And what I try to help people with is just understand the more you use them, the more you play around with them, which is how I found this stuff out. The more you play around with them, the better you get and the better equipped you'll be to make a really good mask or a really good selection when you're using them. On the same topic, if you want to learn more about it, there's another tool that I cover in another video. It's free, it's right here to watch. And if you want to start using these tools to all of their power, I think this is a really important one to get used to. That would be a great place to go next.